The sun hangs lazily over the suburban skyline, casting golden rays across the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge Heights. It's a quiet neighborhood, the kind that prides itself on its uniformity. Pristine white picket fences, matching brick mailboxes, and an unspoken rule that everything must look exactly the same. For Marcus Holloway, this place was supposed to be his sanctuary. After years of hard work in corporate real estate, he finally bought his dream home, a stately, two-story colonial on the best lot in the cul-de-sac. It wasn't just any house. It was his house, his land, a symbol of everything he had fought for. Marcus breathes in the crisp morning air, standing on his front porch with a steaming cup of coffee. His gaze drifts over the lush greenery in his yard, a vibrant oasis he meticulously cultivated. The garden is his pride. Rows of deep purple hydrangeas, golden marigolds, and bright red roses line the walkway. A small vegetable patch thrives in the corner, with cherry tomatoes glistening like rubies. It's not just a garden. It's a piece of his roots, a connection to his grandfather, who taught him how to work the soil as a boy. He smiles, thinking about how much effort went into it. But then his eyes catch something off. A piece of paper fluttering in the morning breeze, taped to his mailbox. Frowning, Marcus strides over and rips it off. Notice of HOA violation. Unapproved garden alterations. He blinks. His garden? A violation? His name is printed in bold at the top, followed by a warning that non-compliance will result in a daily fine. Marcus sighs, shaking his head. It has to be a mistake. Morning, Marcus. He turns to see his neighbor, Tom, walking his golden retriever. A friendly guy, one of the few who didn't look at Marcus like he didn't belong. Morning, Tom. You know anything about this? Marcus holds up the violation notice. Tom's face twists in sympathy. Hell. Looks like Karen's been making her rounds again. Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of the Homeowners Association rules. Marcus exhales sharply. He had seen her at the last HOA meeting, that sharp blonde bob swaying as she prattled on about property values and preserving the community aesthetic. He had rolled his eyes then. Now, she was on his doorstep. Probably a misunderstanding, Marcus says, more to himself than to Tom. I'll talk to her. Tom chuckles. Good luck, man. She's relentless. As Marcus folds the paper and tucks it into his pocket, he shakes off the unease creeping up his spine. It's just a notice, a minor inconvenience. Nothing to worry about. At least, that's what he tells himself. But deep down, something about this doesn't sit right. Not one bit. Marcus doesn't think much about the violation notice at first. Bureaucratic nonsense. Probably an automated form letter. He'll clear it up with a quick conversation. But then, 2 days later, another notice appears. Second notice. Failure to remove unapproved garden. Daily fines now in effect. Marcus exhales sharply, the paper crinkling in his grip. His gaze sweeps over his yard. The garden is still there, of course. It is. But why should it not be? There's nothing wrong with it. Frustration hums beneath his skin as he types out an email to the HOA. Direct, professional, firm. Within minutes, an auto-response pings back. Your inquiry has been received. Please allow 5 to 7 business days for a response. Marcus groans. Figures. Later that afternoon, he spots her. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge Heights. She's standing across the street, clipboard in hand, squinting at his property like she's analyzing a crime scene. Her lips purse in that thin, judgmental way only suburban gatekeepers can master. Marcus watches as she scribbles something, then turns and starts walking away. Excuse me. His voice is even but firm. Karen halts mid-step, glancing over her shoulder before finally turning to face him. Oh, Mr. Holloway, she says, dragging out the words as if tasting something sour. Something I can help you with. Marcus crosses his arms. Yeah, I got 2 violation notices about my garden. I'd love some clarification. Karen blinks innocently. Oh, I'm just enforcing HOA regulations. Surely you understand how important it is to maintain community standards. He keeps his tone controlled. I check the guidelines. There's nothing against having a flower bed or a small vegetable patch. Her expression tightens for half a second, just long enough for Marcus to catch it. Then, she gives a patronizing chuckle. Well, technically speaking, all exterior modifications need board approval. Modifications? He raises an eyebrow. It's landscaping. Karen shrugs. Rules are rules, Mr. Holloway. You should have checked before planting anything so prominent. That word. Prominent. Marcus' stomach tightens. His garden isn't an overgrown jungle. It isn't an eyesore, but it is different, vibrant, full of color. It doesn't blend into the neatly trimmed, lifeless lawn surrounding it. It stands out, and that, he realizes, is the problem. Karen taps her clipboard. Just follow the process, submit an appeal, and we'll consider it at the next HOA meeting. When's that? Karen's smile doesn't reach her eyes. Next quarter. Marcus clenches his jaw. She's dragging it out, making it difficult. He watches as she walks away, smug and satisfied. It's no longer a misunderstanding. It's a message, and Marcus is starting to suspect he knows exactly why she sent it. Marcus isn't the kind of man to let things slide. He spends the next day digging through the Oak Ridge Heights HOA rulebook, scouring every clause, every fine print. Nowhere does it say a resident needs permission for basic landscaping. Sure, structural changes need approval. Fences, sheds, major renovations, but a flower bed and vegetable patch? That's nowhere in the bylaws. Karen is lying. So, Marcus does what any rational person would do. He files a formal complaint. He drafts an email, attaching scanned copies of the HOA's own documents, highlighting the parts that prove her notice is nothing more than a personal vendetta. This time, he doesn't get an auto response. Instead, the next morning, he wakes up to find a bright orange final notice taped to his door. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and legal action. His blood boils. Escalating fines? Legal action? Over a damn garden? He barely has time to process it before his phone buzzes. It's Tom. Hey, man. Tom's voice is low. Just a heads up, Karen's been talking. Marcus frowns. Talking? She's been making her rounds, telling the HOA board you're being hostile and disruptive. Marcus exhales slowly, gripping the phone tighter. Of course she is. Tom hesitates. Look, I know you're in the right, but she's got connections. If you don't tread carefully, they'll find some excuse to make life hell for you. Marcus clenches his jaw. He's already seeing it. The notices, the fines, the slow, systematic harassment. But he's not backing down. He spends the afternoon knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, gathering information. Turns out, Karen's power trip isn't new. Mrs. Patel down the street, fined for excessive yard decorations because she had a few potted plants. The Wongs, harassed about their non-standard porch color, even though it was an HOA-approved shade. And then there's Mr. Leonard, a retired veteran, who stopped attending HOA meetings after Karen tried to enforce a noise ordinance against his wind chimes. Pattern after pattern emerges. Different faces, same problem. She's not just enforcing rules. She's targeting people. And not just any people. People who don't fit into her version of Oak Ridge Heights. That night, Marcus sits at his desk, poring over everything he's collected. His laptop screen glows as he types up a report, dates, statements, even photographs. He's building a case. A real case. Then, just as he's finishing up, his phone buzzes again. An email from Karen. Subject: HOA Board Review Meeting, Urgent. Marcus opens it, scanning the message. The HOA is fast-tracking a hearing about his violations. Not next quarter. Not next month. Tomorrow. And that's when it clicks. Karen isn't just trying to find him. She's trying to set him up. The air in the Oak Ridge Heights Community Center is thick with tension. Residents murmur amongst themselves as they shuffle into their seats. The usual humdrum HOA meeting now transformed into something else entirely. A spectacle. At the front of the room, Karen Whitmore sits with an air of manufactured authority, her clipboard resting neatly on the polished table. Her lips curl into a satisfied smirk as she watches Marcus take a seat near the center, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Let's get started," Karen announces, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Tonight, we're here to discuss a matter of community integrity. One of our residents has repeatedly ignored HOA guidelines and refused to comply with multiple notices." Marcus folds his arms, waiting. Karen turns to him, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Holloway, do you have anything to say for yourselves?" A few board members glance at each other, uncomfortable. They know Karen's reputation, but she has power here. Control. Marcus leans forward, keeping his voice even. "I'd love to hear which specific rule I violated." Karen's smirk deepens. She flips through her pages theatrically, then clears her throat. Per HOA regulations, all major landscaping modifications require prior approval. She gestures toward a stack of printed photos, images of his vibrant garden. "You failed to submit a request. That makes your garden non-compliant." Marcus nods slowly, then pulls out a thick folder of his own. He places it on the table and slides it forward. "This is a copy of the Oak Ridge Heights bylaws. I've highlighted the landscaping section." Karen's brow twitches. Marcus continues. "Nowhere in these documents does it say a resident needs approval for basic gardening. Your violation notices were based on a rule that doesn't exist." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Karen's fingers tighten around her pen. "That's..." She starts, but Marcus isn't finished. "I also have statements from multiple residents." He gestures toward Tom, Mrs. Patel, the Wongs, and others in the audience. All of them have been unfairly fined or harassed over minor, completely legal choices about their properties. Karen's jaw tightens. "That's not..." And Marcus adds, pulling out one last document, "I also have email records showing that you personally fast-tracked this hearing, despite the HOA's standard review process requiring at least a 30-day notice." Karen's face turns rigid. A pin-drop silence fills the room. The board members exchange nervous glances. Then, Marcus delivers the final blow. "I'd also like to remind everyone that, per HOA bylaws, any decision regarding community enforcement must be reviewed by the HOA president." Karen scoffs. "Exactly. And as acting..." I wasn't finished. Marcus calmly pulls out a second folder. "Because, as of last month's internal elections, I'm the HOA president." The room collectively gasps. Karen's smirk vanishes, so fast it's almost comedic. Marcus lets the weight of his words settle. The power balance shifts in real time. Karen, who moments ago held the meeting in her grip, now looks as if the ground has been yanked from beneath her. He leans back in his chair, watching her struggle for words. "So, Karen, since I'm the one who actually has authority over enforcement, I'm going to formally dismiss these violations. Effective immediately." Karen's mouth opens, then closes. She looks at the board members for backup, but none of them will meet her gaze. The residents, those she has bullied and controlled, are no longer afraid. "No!" she sputters, voice rising in desperation. You can't just..." "Oh, but I can," Marcus interrupts, flipping through the documents with a satisfied smile. "Because rules are rules, Karen." The tension snaps. A few people chuckle. Tom outright grins. Karen's face turns a furious shade of red, but she can't argue. Not anymore. She has already lost. A heavy silence lingers in the room, thick with shock and realization. Karen's entire facade, her authority, her control, has shattered in an instant. She blinks rapidly, her fingers curling tightly around her clipboard, as if it's the only thing tethering her to power. Marcus lets the moment stretch, enjoying the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The once smug enforcer of HOA rules now looks like a cornered animal, her confidence draining with each passing second. Then, predictably, she snaps. "This is ridiculous," Karen scoffs, her voice shrill with forced bravado. "You can't just waltz in here and claim to be the HOA president. That's not how this works." Marcus raises an eyebrow. "You think I'd make that up?" He reaches into his folder, pulls out one last document, and holds it up for the board and residents to see. "My official election confirmation. Signed, stamped, approved." Karen's lips press together so tightly they turn white. Tom snickers from the crowd. "So, did you not know who the HOA president was, Karen?" Laughter ripples through the room. Karen whips her head toward the board members, desperate for anyone to step in. But they avoid her gaze, unwilling to fight a battle she's already lost. Still, she isn't done yet. "I was only trying to maintain community standards," she hisses, her voice laced with barely concealed contempt. "I've done more for this neighborhood than anyone." Marcus tilts his head, feigning curiosity. "More for the neighborhood? You mean like illegally issuing fines? Harassing homeowners? Violating your own HOA regulations?" Karen flinches, but she still holds her ground. "That's not harassment. I've simply been upholding the values that make this community great. By targeting people like me." The words cut through the room like a blade. The murmurs grow louder, whispers of realization passing between residents. "People like me." The Wongs exchange glances. Mrs. Patel nods knowingly. Mr. Leonard folds his arms, his expression dark. The pattern is no longer a vague suspicion. It's undeniable. Karen senses the shift and quickly backpedals. "That's not what I meant," she blurts. "I don't see race. I just enforce the rules." Marcus smirks. "You don't see race? Interesting, because I did a little research." He pulls out a stack of documents and lays them on the table. "Over the past 3 years, every violation, fine, and complaint you've issued has disproportionately targeted homeowners who don't fit a certain mold." Karen shakes her head, laughing nervously. "That's just a coincidence." Marcus leans forward, his voice like ice. "Is it? Because I also found security footage of you personally removing garden violation notices from other homes. White homeowners' homes." A gasp spreads across the room. Karen's eyes widen. That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," Marcus replies, pulling out his phone and pressing play. The screen lights up with grainy but unmistakable footage of Karen, clipboard in hand, casually plucking violation notices off certain houses while doubling up on others. Karen's face drains of color. One of the board members, a balding man in his 60s, clears his throat. "Karen, is this true?" She lurches forward, desperation creeping into her voice. I was just trying to be fair. Some of these violations didn't really need enforcing, so I used my discretion." Tom barks a laugh. "Discretion? Oh, so you just discreetly let some people slide while hammering others." Karen's panic grows. "It's not like that. I was just following protocol." Marcus tilts his head. "Funny, because if I had done this, you'd be talking about rules right now. How did you put it earlier? Rules are rules." Karen's mouth flaps open, but no words come out. One of the board members clears his throat again, his face dark with disapproval. "This is a serious violation of HOA policy. You don't have the authority to pick and choose who gets fined." The murmurs in the crowd rise to outright disdain. Karen, for the first time, looks genuinely afraid. I was only trying to keep the neighborhood from what?" Marcus interrupts smoothly. "Changing? Becoming too diverse?" A deadly silence falls over the room. Karen stares at him, mouth agape. She has no way out. The board members shift uncomfortably, but one of them finally speaks. "Given this evidence, we need to discuss disciplinary action immediately." Karen's breath hitches. Wait, disciplinary. We'll be calling an emergency board session to review your role in HOA, the chairman announces. Until then, you're suspended from any HOA-related responsibilities. Karen's body tenses like a live wire. You can't do that. Oh, we can. The chairman replies grimly. The crowd erupts in murmurs, some in satisfaction, some in disbelief. Karen looks around, searching for an ally, someone to stand up for her. There's no one. And then Marcus seals her fate. Before we adjourn, he says, standing up, I'd like to formally introduce a motion for Karen Whitmore's removal from the HOA board, effective immediately. The room bursts into applause. Karen's face contorts in rage, in disbelief, in sheer helplessness. But it doesn't matter. The tables have turned. Marcus watches her as the board members nod in agreement, as her once loyal supporters turn their backs on her. The Queen of Oak Ridge Heights has just been dethroned. The next morning, Oak Ridge Heights is buzzing with the fallout of last night's meeting. Karen Whitmore, once the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, is nowhere to be seen. Normally, she would be making her rounds, clipboard in hand, scrutinizing every minor detail of people's lawns and driveways. Today, though, her porch light is off. Her car is gone. By noon, an official email from the HOA board hits everyone's inbox. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore has been removed from all HOA duties, pending further investigation into her conduct. Marcus reads the email twice, a slow smile forming. Justice. Later that afternoon, he's out in his yard, pruning his hydrangeas, when Tom walks up with a grin. Man, I gotta tell you, I haven't seen someone crash and burn that fast since my cousin tried to deep fry a turkey. Marcus chuckles. I take it the neighborhood is happy? Oh, ecstatic. Tom leans against the fence, shaking his head. You should have seen the old HOA members this morning. They were scrambling, talking about damage control. Looks like some of them knew what Karen was doing, but didn't want to rock the boat. Marcus isn't surprised. Silence is complicity. But get this, Tom continues, lowering his voice like he's about to share a secret. Someone went digging into Karen's own violations. Turns out, she's been breaking HOA rules for years. Unapproved patio extension, unregistered guests staying past policy limits, and wait for it, she's been pocketing HOA fees. Marcus lifts an eyebrow. Pocketing? Skimming off late fees. Funneling money into her own home improvement projects. Tom grins. Guess who's getting an official audit? Marcus laughs, shaking his head. Poetic justice. Just as they're talking, a black sedan rolls down the street. It slows in front of Karen's house, and two men in suits step out. HOA investigators. A few neighbors peek out from their porches, watching as they knock on her door. There's no answer, but the sight alone is enough to send a ripple through the community. By evening, the rumors are in full swing. Karen, in a fit of humiliation, has packed her bags and left town. Some say she's staying with family. Others think she's trying to avoid the HOA's financial probe. Either way, she's gone. A week later, Marcus receives an official letter from the HOA. All violations against his garden have been revoked. He leans back in his chair, exhaling deeply. Not just because he won, but because he fought and changed something. That weekend, Oak Ridge Heights holds a neighborhood barbecue, a rare event where people actually talk instead of just exchanging polite nods. The Wongs bring dumplings. Mrs. Patel brings samosas, and Mr. Leonard, for the first time in years, sets up his wind chimes again. Marcus stands on his porch, taking it all in. Tom claps him on the back. You did good, man. Marcus nods, watching the neighborhood he fought for finally start to feel like home. Justice wasn't just about taking Karen down. It was about changing the rules.